is the ranch actually an intelligent thing that's causing things to happen? Is the if the hitchhiker effect is real, like what path, highway is that traveling on? I think it's real because I've obviously experienced stuff and I've heard stories and I've witnessed things. But like what is that path? What does that highway look like? How is that highway? Like, does it have to find a crack to navigate through in individuals? I don't know. I don't know. Do you know?
Yeah, I do. I have all the answers. No,
Do you
no,
share
I
them with
don't.
me, please?
I don't. I think a big part of the problem is the way we actually talk about this and the way we see
Hmm.
it. It's not really about the land, uh, literally the land. We're talking
Hmm.
about a non-human intelligence.
Right.
And so there's a place, set and setting basically, and then there's this non-human intelligence. And is it precognitive? People say it's precognitive. People say it can read your mind. So it can read
Hmm.
your thoughts and it can see your future. That's
Or it makes you do things. I mean, it's either, right? Like, is it seeing your future or is it causing the future to happen? I mean, I think
exactly.
that's interesting. That
Yeah.
to go back to the Dean Radin thing, him talking about like our future brain and our past brain being connected on some quantum level. And so that's a wild thing to think about. And his study that he did, which was most interesting and I think applicable to the ranch, is that he has found that novelty is what is the biggest predictor for these sort of psi events, not probability. And when we talk about the stuff on the ranch, they've often said that when new things are introduced, whenever we do something new, when we bring someone new there, stuff seems to happen. Um, because you're right. The ranch is, and it's not confined to just that odd shape of land that they've got. It's like two squares. Um, it extends past everything. And I mean, from what we know too, like the surrounding areas. But is it precognitive or is it us being driven by it? I don't know.
Well, let me give you one example. And I think this is the most telling thing about what's really going on the ranch. I think this is the core story. And that's Lacatski,
Hmm.
right? He goes with Bigelow on the ranch. They go in the main homestead and they're in the kitchen. They're not in the living room. They're in the
Right.
kitchen, right? And he sees that pipe shape that materialize. He does not recognize what it is, but he sees this chrome pipe thing and he
Yeah.
sees it. The other two people don't. It comes and goes in a mist. I think it was yellow. There's some colors involved. It was solid.
Right.
He's only been on the ranch for, like I said, 20, 30 minutes. He's stunned. He's so scared he doesn't even say anything. He gets in the car and they leave the ranch. And once they get far enough from the ranch, he goes, "Hey, I actually saw something back there." Right. Um, it was a personal thing to him. He didn't really know what the meaning of the symbol was. Right. But it
Right.
was such a profound experience. Lacatski ends up being the guy that goes back to Pentagon and says, he was the one that really pushed for the military getting involved, Pentagon getting involved. There wouldn't have been an AAWSAP
Right.
without that one vision, right? And we might not even have the disclosure hearings this week if we hadn't had that.
Oh
And
yeah.
even the debunkers have acknowledged that one narrative, that one experience that Lacatski had on Skinwalker Ranch basically did everything. The whole disclosure sort of started there because of him and AAWSAP, which led to
Hmm.
ATIP, Lou Elizondo. And what's really interesting about that is it come to find out that tubular shape that he saw, it's actually the album cover to Mike Oldfield's album Tubular Bells.
I have heard that. Yeah.
Yes, but also that song, it's a theme song for a movie,
Which movie is it?
The Exorcist.
Of
It's the
course.
actual no, it's the main theme song to the Exorcist movie. Okay. So you step back from that and say, okay, we're dealing with the non-human intelligence. I can't believe that came from Lacatski. And so I'm wondering, okay, does it know that it's going to have this little effect, this butterfly effect into the future? Or the non-human
So
intelligence, I'm convinced the non-human intelligence is a part of this puzzle. It's a separate intelligent entity that we're dealing with that we quite often forget about. But
mhm.
it does it know what's going on? Is it among us? Well, a lot of people are feeling like they're getting communication from the phenomenon, whatever the phenomenon is. People feel
I
they're
agree
getting
with that.
communication. So in that sense, it is among us because a lot of people are actually feeling out there in communication where they have a relationship with it, right? Everybody knows what a UFO is. We're debating not whether they're real or not, but we know what a UFO actually is.
Right.
And so we're sort of set up with all of this collective unconscious priming, if you will. And then these little events happen on the ranch that have huge implications. And I don't feel like we're done with that. I feel like there's something else is going to happen on the ranch, maybe even a small thing that is going to have huge consequences.
I think so too. I fully think so. I'm interested to see how it plays out in the public sphere. I have very complicated feelings on that because I feel like it's exciting and scary, if that makes sense. I often worry about the team themselves and making sure that people don't get overzealous. So I'm interested to see how it's going to play out. But I very, very much agree with you. I mean, I've heard this repeatedly, is that Skinwalker Ranch is kind of at the center of moving all of this forward because of it going to the government, and then these people that have been involved with it all have ties to the ranch. The Tubular Bells thing is really interesting because you also have to think of like the point A to point B in Lacatski's head to be comfortable enough to share that. Like, I'd like to have known what went through his mind that made him decide that he was going to say something and not just keep it to himself. Because being in his position, he would have had a lot more to lose and to gain from something like that. And if it had been something else that had been shown to him too, would it have had a different impact? So it seems really interesting that it was so specific. And I do think that we see a lot of that. I think that these synchronicities and these visions or sounds of like disembodied voices and things, the communication that's occurring, that is a theme that runs through it. And I think that it reminds us that the ranch isn't just a location. And perhaps that's how Hitchhiker Effect operates, is because we see everything as very like point A to point B, like here to there, but really kind of everything operates together. And so there is not much of a separation, even though there is a physical location that is the ranch, that the whatever's operating there isn't bound by any type of geographical location, perhaps.
Well, I think the details of that event say a lot about the phenomenon. Because he saw that specific shape. Now, the phenomenon theoretically could have made him see literally anything. It could have given him a direct message of, you are not alone, or shown him a UFO or a floating alien head or whatever it wanted to say, something more direct. But instead, it showed him a shape that he didn't even know what the meaning of it was at the time. He found it out later. And it had a sense of humor to it.
It does.
I mean,
it seems like it does.
The Exorcist theme. I mean, what are the odds that that's a coincidence? It seems pretty low. So why did it choose to do that specifically? Why did it work in that way? And I think what we can do is we can correlate that to other people's experiences, because they tend to have the same type of thing where it's something abstract that has a deeper meaning, but they have to figure it out. They've got to dig down into it to try and understand it. Yeah. It's kind of the idea that the phenomenon is kind of poking us and going, you need to look deeper. You need to look within yourself. You need to explore this and figure out what it means.
So for it to have any type of impact, I imagine it would have to operate off of something very fine-tuned for an individual. It's just interesting that it happened to be him.
My theory is that at a minimum, when he was on the ranch, this non-human intelligence, it sort of knew who he was. It knew his connections, right? At a minimum. But I don't think it took a chance. I don't think it was like rolling the dice, hoping something would happen.
Right.
If the hitchhiker can leave the ranch and follow people around to the point where, these families where there's other kids in the school where the kids go that have it, if it's got that capability, it's following him. It knew what it was doing. it set him up. He had an ontological shock over this.
Right.
He really struggled with it, but it sort of set him up. It set up Brandon. And now we've got this lab where we've got how many 30 cameras on the ranch, all this instrumentation.
Oh, more. I think it's like 45.
So now we've all been set up, because at any point this non-human intelligence could do something else. If it can do Lacatski, it can do, and there's going to be a lot of cameras and a lot of data.
So I have theories on stuff. I don't want to speak for anybody else. I do know that like during Bigelow's era, I've heard firsthand stories from people like Chris Bartell, and he's a great guy. You guys should talk to. He's got a very interesting take on it, and a lot of obviously firsthand experience. And to go to the point of like the ranch, knowing that Lacatski was there, we saw it this season with Jay Stratton showing up and the data points that correlated with his arrival and leaving. Yeah, I mean, I think Tubular Bells being tied to The Exorcist, and The Exorcist being such a huge, like that movie is not new. And my father told me stories about like creepy things that happened around The Exorcist, like it like tapped into for my father, at least, I know, just sort of socially, the conversation that happened around that movie, and really diving into like religion and possession and sort of playing, I think, off of religious fear as well. It's considered to be like a very classic horror film, that even then we know that like on the set of the movie that stuff happened. So I mean, it has a lot of, that specific film has a lot of weight to it. So I'm not sure, can we remove Tubular Bells from that, and is that part of the messaging, that like that something else can possess something, that something needs to be exorcised out of a place, that it can be, I mean, that really kind of opens a box of other questions. If I'm not sure that we can remove the tie between the two, if we know for a fact that like it's the Tubular Bell, and then it's intrinsically kind of tied to this film, because stories are so important to not just us now, but just traditionally, like throughout human history. Like we kind of survive on our stories. So if we do start paying attention to maybe some representations being pulled from stories that are culturally important, we might find some of the answers to the symbolism there. I don't know.
What I find interesting is so the story is retold in Skinwalkers of the Pentagon, for anyone that wants to actually read the story. But so it's the Tubular Bells, it's The Exorcist, which you said at the time was a huge cultural shock phenomenon when it, and so he goes back to the Pentagon, and what's the end result? There's all these generals that remember The Exorcist, and they're saying the phenomenon is demonic.
Yeah,
that's the end result. So in the Pentagon, everyone's like, oh, it's demonic, and you can see there's sort of a case for that potentially. But I think the entity, this non-human intelligence, sort of set us all up. It set up Lacatski, it set up the Pentagon. So there's this whole demonic thing, and that's continuing to play a part in this even today with disclosure. There are still a lot of people on the other side in the Pentagon that believe this is demonic, fundamentally demonic.
And whenever I hear that, part of me, no, probably a larger part of me, tends to go back to the idea of like that hostile architecture, almost like a hostile story representation, where it's just like, perhaps it's just not something we're supposed to be messing with in protection for ourselves, like when we're talking about geographically, maybe with the ranch, because the idea of a wormhole being there or something like that, is there a way to literally scare people away from it, and also keep things from, I mean, I don't really know, but I hear demonic or the Skinwalker, and that's, to think about that, like the Skinwalker plays on the fears of the indigenous people that are there. The Exorcist plays on the fear of basically the general population in sort of like America, when you're talking about the religion being such a huge thing here. And so it's very easy to just be like, demonic, stay away from it. Right? Because like, how else are you going to mess with the psyche? Because if it was weaponry, I don't feel like that would be enough to scare the people off, because we're like, oh, we would be able to physically fight. But when you start playing on literally like this spirituality, the good versus evil, God versus the devil, demons versus angels, when you start messing with that, you're reaching a whole different level of kind of like fear that a lot of people just carry around at a simmer, right? Like, so I don't know. It does make me wonder if it has more to do with sort of trying to give the message of like back off, stay away, rather than it being anything else.